Hello, Jose Santiago here. Today I'm going to share with you a technique on how to deal with rolling shutter in SynthEyes and then export that information into Nuke so it can further assist us in creating a perfect match move reel. So what is rolling shutter? In short, it's an artifact that appears in your footage as wobbling or skewing. Let's take a look at this sequence here shot on an iPhone 5C. Keep your eyes on the van, the door, and the storage container as I play through the footage. Did you see that? That's rolling shutter. With this form of distortion, it's impossible for your mesh to deform without some help. Here's an example of how your match move would look like. Not very pleasing, right? For presentation purposes, we want to shoot for something more like this. And it all begins with our tracking software. Here we are in SynthEyes. I'm quickly going to do an auto solve and then clean up some trackers to lower down my error value. This sequence has rolling shutter, so I'm going to move into my shot, edit shot menu, and then right down here, I'm going to check on rolling shutter. Right over here on the side is where we input our information. There's math involved in here, so please refer to the SynthEyes manual for more information. For right now, I'm just going to leave it at the default settings. My error value is at a 0.6. Let's see if I can get this lower. I'm going back to my edit shot and try 0.5 to see what I get. Okay, so I'm setting at a 0.59. Not bad, right? I don't know. Let's take a look at some of these trackers here. As I play through them, are these trackers helping us? Can we really call them solid? I wouldn't really count on these trackers. So pretty much what I'm trying to show you is not to use the rolling shutter feature as a band-aid. We need to make sure that we have solid tracks before we move on. But for right now, let's use what we have. We're going to focus on this door here. I'm going to start off by deleting these two trackers and then quickly throw in some new tracks. Select them and color them red, and then set up my distance constraint. I'm going to build my door and set it to the origin. Now I'm going to take my whole scene and line it up with my door. Let's play through a couple of frames to see how it's coming out. Not bad. So it looks like frames 115 and 114 we're getting the distortion. So we're going to focus on these frames when we jump into Nuke. I'm going to export this as a Nuke file and then create a new folder. I highly recommend doing this because SynthEyes is going to create distortion maps and you want this all together. You want to make sure first frame slate is checked on, and we can remove sticky notes. Make sure SD maps is checked on. Alright, now we're all set, let's move on to Nuke. Here's my file open in Nuke. The node graph is pretty small, but depending on the number of meshes we built in SynthEyes, this graph will be a lot bigger. I'm going to start by organizing my nodes here. I'm going to unplug my trackers and shader and move it to the side. I'm going to rename my box here to door. Move this a little closer and let's zoom in a bit here to focus in on the door. This is not helping us here, so I'm going to bring in a checkerboard node. Change my size to about 200. I'm going into my door node and change rows and columns to 2. Now to fix this distortion, I'm going into my camera node, projections tab, and in near, I'm going to add a couple of zeros. That's much better. To help me out, I'm going to set my render to textured plus wireframe. The wireframe here is used to line things up. I'm going to add a multiply node, set it to RGBA, and give it a value of 2, so I can see through the checkerboard node. To not destroy the original mesh, I'm going to use the edit geo node. Move into my transform tab, and here is where we're going to do all of our work. Depending how much work we did in SynthEyes will determine how much work we would do in here. We're going to work in the skew section, so I'm going to set a key on X in this frame. We may also need to tweak translate X and maybe some scale on Y as the object squash and stretch. I'm going to move to frame 115 and key in my skew value here. I can see that I'm off, so I need to adjust translate X and set a key. Tweak my skew, go back to 114 and set a key at 0. Toggle between the two frames. It looks good. Move to 116 and set this one to 0 and this one to 0. Play through some frames to see how it looks. Once we have everything perfectly lined up, we can export it as a sequence file and then merge it over the original plate. Here's an example. Let me close this out, bring in a right node, go into my multiply node and set the value to 1. Turn off my footage, set the channels to RGBA in the right node, and then save it out as a Targa or a PNG sequence file. I have one all set, so I'll bring that in, merge it over my footage, bring in a multiply node, and set it to RGBA and give it a value of 0.5. Bring in a right node and then render this out as a movie file to use in my editing software. To recap, make sure your shot is locked down in SynthEyes, so that way all you have to do is deal with skew in the transform tab in Nuke. I hope you found this technique helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Till next time, take care.